Hey guys, Dylan here from Flow Designs. Today I've got the Gen 2 Yaris behind me. I want to show you how to install a spoiler extension onto it. The tools you'll need for this are a drill with a 3 and 10mm drill bits or a step bit, trim remover tools, a pair of scissors, a 10mm socket, and a 3mm hex bit driver. To get started, the spoiler has to come off for the installation, so open up the boot to get access to the bolts that hold it on. So to get access to the bolts, you have to remove these 4 plastic covers as well as this big one in the middle using your plastic pry tool. As this is a Gen 2 Yaris, there's no rear light at the top, so there's no plug here. If you have a Gen 1, there's an electrical connector here that you have to remove first. Once that's done, you can grab a 10mm socket and take off the 5 bolts. When taking these off, be sure to be very careful not to drop them into the boot lid. With the nuts and bolts off, it's time to pull it off. I've grabbed a friend to help me, but it's not essential. So from below, grab it and lift it up. Here's the spoiler. I put it on a nice soft surface to avoid scratches. It might have looked easy to take off. That's because we had these clips removed just for ease. We've also drilled out the holes already, as we've installed it already. So now we can grab the template to mark out where these holes should be. So here I've got the template onto the spoiler. There's a few places where you have to make sure they all line up, especially the corners. That's step A. Make sure they're nice and lined up. It's also the middle part, the brake light or the braking plate for Gen 2. Make sure those corners line up. You also have these turns up over here, marked C. Make sure they're lined up, as well as this edge down here. Once it's aligned, you can start taping it down. Just make sure you're really careful, as it has a tendency to move. It's pretty finicky. You can either drill through the template or just tape it so it's like on a hinge, so you can lift it up and check your marked holes, as well as you can bring over the spoiler extension itself and lay it out over your marked holes, just so you can make sure it's lined up properly. I'm going to tape it down fully, as I'm going to drill through the template, which is another option. So here it is all taped down. I really recommend you marking the holes with the pen before removing the template and bringing the extension over and overlaying it onto the holes to make sure it's all lined up before you start drilling. Once you're happy with your marked points, grab a 3mm drill bit and start drilling out the pilot holes. Before you enlarge the holes, now's a good time to double check them. So I've grabbed the spoiler extension, and here I've got it and putting it up against the corners at the end of the flat part. You can see how it lines up with the brake light and also back to the other corner. Now you can just make sure once you bend it and force it to fit if the holes line up. Once you're 100% confident that the holes are properly positioned, you can grab a 10mm drill bit to enlarge them, or a step bit if you would prefer. Before you start drilling, be super careful to not drill through the spoiler, as it is pretty thin and you have to be pretty careful, especially with the bigger drill bits. So now that the holes are installed, it's time to prepare for mounting. So firstly, make sure you take off the masking now from both sides, and be really sure to take care of the gloss side, as it's pretty easy to scratch. Now is also the time to choose which side you'd like to face the top. So today I'll be installing it with the gloss facing up. So that means I want to turn it around and put the bolts through the other side. And I'm going to pre-thread them onto the rubber nuts. So now that all the bolts are in and only lightly threaded into the rubber nuts, we can prepare the surfaces with our alcohol prep pads. So on the surface you want to be facing up, we'll prepare with this as well as the OEM spoiler. This prep pad is so that we can adhere the tape on properly to the surfaces. So ensure you put it on where the tape will go. That's outlined in the instructions as well as this video. So now it's time for the primer. This will go also where you've cleaned and below the tape. You want to make sure you only get it where the tape will go, as it can leave a residue if it's just out in the elements. So it can help if you line us up with the OEM spoiler to see where this thin part especially will overlap, to make sure you get it in the right spot. So I'm going to put this up against where it should go. It's kind of hard to see with the bolts in the way, but we'll just try and work out where it goes. And then once you're happy with the alignment, you can grab some tape, just mark out the bottom of this so you know where to apply the primer. So now to apply the primer, you grab it and break it in half, so the glass cracks, and let it run into the cotton bud. Once that's wet, you can apply it. Once that's done, you have to make sure it dries before you put any tape on it. And once it's dry, grab your tape and run it along the primer. I'm going to put the tape along here and the sides of the spoiler, but because this thin part is kind of hard to align onto the spoiler, I want to apply one line of tape on the thin part of the spoiler extension and the rest of the tape on this. Now that the tape's on, we want to peel a corner of each piece of tape just so we can reach it later once it's bolted together. So now it's ready to install. Make sure the tapes are still off to the side. So now that the tape's all off to the side, we want to make sure that before we install it, all the nuts here are on snugly. Not tight, but just enough to not rattle around. So now it's time to install. So just making sure the 4 pieces of tape are off to the side. And we can place this down, lining the holes with the nuts, and then pushing them through. So now they're all popped in and it's time to tighten. Just before you do that, make sure the plastic's all hanging out, all 4, so you can pull them. But also make sure that nothing's fallen into the spoiler like the rubber nuts. That's why make sure there's no rattling before you push them in. You don't want it tight so they can still squeeze in, but make sure they can't rattle loose. So as you tighten these, make sure you push it down so the rubber nut's fully into the hole. You can go around the whole spoiler and slowly snug them up one at a time before you do one fully tight, just so it's all nice and even. Now that they're all nice and snug, we can pull off the tape and before we fully tighten it. And then once that's done, make sure you hold it for around 10 minutes to make sure it adheres to the plastic. Don't force the tape. If it's getting stuck, just loosen it a bit so it doesn't break. And now we'll just snug it up fully. These don't have to be too tight, so don't over torque them, just so they're nice and snug. So now I've done up all the bolts by hand, nice and tight, and I've held it onto the adhesive for like around 10 minutes. So now it's ready to go in the car. So now at the car, we'll just put it up into its spot. And then push down so all the clips get engaged. Once it's all clipped on, you can open the boot to tighten up the bolts. When you do up these bolts and nuts, just be careful to not over torque me. And now the last step is putting all the plugs back on. Just remember, if you have a Gen 1, don't forget to reconnect your brake line. And there you go guys, that's how you install our spoiler extension onto the Yaris. Please avoid washing or driving your car for the first 12 hours after installation. If you have any other questions, feel free to let us know, and I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.